What's up, everybody? Welcome into Group Chat Football Live. I am Peter Ariz alongside D Money, and this is our show that we go live daily, talking portal movement across the country, recruiting, coaching movement. It's been a great month here on Group Chat Football Live, following along all the craziness here, and big names continue to enter the portal, as we'll get to here in a second. Big decisions continue to be made. And it feels like the 28th, everyone said, man, the portal's closed. Things are going to slow down. That has not been the case whatsoever.
No, we're talking about big teams making major moves that are going to impact the college football playoff race. Again, this is Group Chat Football Live. Appreciate everybody joining live. Please like and subscribe if you want to be up to date on the latest college football transactions, news, and notes every single day. We will keep you up to date on all the movement, all the players rising, falling, everything happening off the field, so you know what's happening on the field in your favorite sport of college football. So you talk about Georgia, right? Alabama, Ohio State kind of creeping around. These are moves that are going to impact the college football playoff next year. And that, to me, is what's interesting. It's not teams that are just on the bottom trying to move up a little bit, right? Or your Colorado's trying to remake a whole roster. These are powerhouse programs making major moves at premium positions.
And we'll start with the Georgia Bulldogs, as one of their more talented players on the defensive side of the ball, Damon Wilson, is entering the portal, former five-star in the 2023 recruiting class. And this is an interesting one, D, because a lot of these former five-stars that we talk about haven't necessarily broken through at their destinations. And this is a guy in Damon Wilson who, originally from Venice, Florida, 6'4", 250, had 22 tackles, 3 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 2 fumble recoveries this season, and really flashed at times for this Georgia defense. It's an interesting decision to enter here, but a really, really talented pass rusher on the market now.
Yeah, this is a guy we've watched, obviously being here in Florida, seeing him since he was in high school, always been an incredible talent, bend, explosiveness. You mentioned, Pete, that, and I remember this from when he's a recruit, the whole family's really focused on physical fitness. This is a guy that's trained. This guy's a guy that's been ready from a college-ready body standpoint for a while. 6'4", 250, couldn't draw him up any better, and he's been productive. Now, look, if you're Georgia, you got Jalen Walker, you got Michael Williams, you're talking about first-round, top 10 type pass rusher, so nobody is seeing the field in front of those guys, right? Especially considering that they're draft eligible and older. But this guy played, man. I watched the Notre Dame game, and Wilson was playing a ton in that particular ball game. So it's not like this is somebody who was buried and is just living off his ranking. You mentioned the 3 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 2 fumble recoveries. One of those forced fumbles against Arch Manning at a critical point in the Texas game, forcing that fumble, which was a huge turning point in that ball game. So this is a guy who's played well. And when you look at Georgia, Jalen Walker's out the door, Michael Williams out the door, Chaz Chambliss potentially out the door. You got Gabe Harris coming back, Quintavious Johnson coming back, but not a lot. Isaiah Gibson, one of the top players in Georgia's recruiting class. Is he ready to step in right away as a true freshman? I'm not sure. If he does, I'm not sure he's going to give you more than a third-year, very physically developed Damon Wilson will. So this is kind of an interesting move. I'm just scouring the Georgia forums. They're not very happy about this move, as you would imagine. This is not like something you'd expect. Georgia's losing some pretty important players. Certainly with Wilson, and you hear buzz about others, a lot of players jumping in the portal, really at all levels of the team. They're bringing guys in. We'll talk about some of those guys. We talked about the Branch brothers yesterday on the show, but it's concerning when you're a program that is so good at turning these exact kind of guys into first rounders, 2 of them this year, that Damon Wilson would want to leave the program.
And there's already early reports that Ohio State is a team to watch here. I know they were very involved in his recruitment, so that would make sense. Is it a situation where he goes in and feels like he's going to be the man right away? Potentially. And obviously Ohio State has their history developing those type of pass rushers as well.
Yeah, Ohio State makes a lot of sense following defensive end coach, not to be the Instagram detective, but following Leyland Clark on Instagram.
That's important stuff, man. The Instagram detective work.
Look, it makes sense. If you're going to leave Georgia, you don't want to take a step backwards. You go to a team like Ohio State that's loaded. And look, Ohio State's losing guys themselves, right? When you talk about JTT, you talk about Sawyer going to the next level. They got to replace those guys, and those guys have been developed very, very well at Ohio State. We know Ohio State's tradition of developing defensive linemen right there on par with Georgia. So maybe the system fit for a guy like Damon Wilson. He feels better there, that he's going to be able to just kind of pin his ears back and rush the passer. I know with Georgia and some of their edge rushers, there's been that concern that they're not fully unleashed. You saw that with Trayvon Walker, even though it didn't affect him, right? He was the first overall pick of the draft and has had success in the pros. But there has been that sort of school of thought with Georgia that they don't really unleash their pass rushers and let them get after the quarterback the way they're fully capable of. Ohio State doesn't have that problem. They let those guys rip. Maybe that's guiding this decision. I don't know. I'm just speculating, and I'm not saying it's the right decision. But if you're going to leave a place like Georgia and an opportunity he has, Ohio State is a similar opportunity with talk about the two best teams in terms of pass rushers in the country. I can't imagine there's two better tandems than what Georgia and Ohio State has. They both got to replace them. Maybe he just likes the system better at Ohio State.
Anthony Manzano says Georgia also has Elijah Griffin coming in who could make a pretty quick impact there. He's asking about Miami with Damon Wilson. Miami, there was mutual interest there during that recruitment, so I'm not going to count that one out completely. Ohio State just makes, I think, a little bit more sense right now.
Yeah, and so with Griffin, he's going to play in the interior, so I'm not sure he's going to impact Wilson. I mean, Wilson was going to in line to play a ton. If you are looking for a young player on Georgia to play at the edge, Isaiah Gibson, it's kind of similar player to a Damon Wilson, body type wise, the ability to get after the passer. Honestly, if I'm comparing them out of high school, I thought Damon Wilson was a little more exciting of a prospect, both blue chip elite players. But this is an interesting one, man. I think the only explanation I can think is, number one, Georgia's losing a lot of guys. Is something happening there internally for a team that's so good and has been on such a tear that you have defensive players unhappy. Something just doesn't smell right there. But maybe it's just a system fit deal because Damon Wilson had a huge opportunity at Georgia.
So you talked at the start how it's a lot of big programs, a lot of things happening now that could impact what we see a year from now in the playoffs. And Alabama, they're not just sitting around, as they just lost Justice Haynes at the running back position. They've now added former Louisiana running back Jaden Washington. If you just look at the numbers here on this one, only 478 yards and 5 touchdowns this last season. He's been there for a couple years and has multiple years of eligibility remaining. But just you turn on the tape here, and he looks like a back behind a strong offensive line in Alabama that could really do some damage in the SEC.
Yeah, this was a weird one in terms of I'm watching this guy's clips and put on a game and just kind of seeing him move around. How is this guy not getting more carries at Louisiana? I know they had some good backs, but man, 73 rushes, average 6.5 yards per carry, had some explosive runs. But when you say, okay, separating the production, because production from G5 to SEC, that's never, automatic. So looking at the traits, he's 215 pounds listed, 5'9", doesn't matter. He's 215 pounds, so he's sturdy. Then you go to his high school, went to Hemphill, Texas, really small town in Texas, 100 meters, 10.83 in the 100 meters, 22.1 in the 200 meters, and he qualified for regionals in the shot put 45, 7.5 inches. So, I mean, that is big time speed for a 215 plus pound running back when you're running 10.8. I mean, those are jets. I don't care if you're in the SEC. I don't care where you are. Those are legitimate jets that will be able to crank out big runs in the SEC if he gets daylight. You mentioned the running style. He looks smooth and fluid. It didn't look like he was just like a track star playing running back. So, putting him into this room, which is filled with extremely highly touted high school players. Jan Miller, who played last year, 668 yards, only 4.6 yards per carry. You want to up that explosiveness if you're Alabama, given the standard. Richard Young, Daniel Hill, Kevin Riley, Akai Landier. These are big-time, highly recruited players. But watching us played, and I don't think he's just a body, man. When you run 10.8 and you're 215 pounds and you're somewhat smooth and coordinated, this to me seems like somebody who maybe he's not going to run for 1,200 yards for Alabama, but you could be watching a big game and see this guy crank out a 60, 70-yard touchdown and say, oh, wow, okay, that was a difference-making play.
Yeah, and I said he had multiple years of eligibility, only has 1 year, but an underrated aspect of this pickup to me, D, is he only has 229 carries over the course of his career. So not a guy that's been beat up a lot. Sometimes you see these transfers of the running back spot, and look, they're young, they're in college, right? But at the end of the day, carries are carries, and they can wear on a guy. He hasn't been beat up hypothetically by getting, again, 229 carries over the course of a few years here.
Yeah, and look, Justice Haynes is gone, right? He's going to Michigan. So this is an offense that needs juice, right? They fired their co-defensive coordinator, but defense really was not the problem at Alabama. The problems were more focused on the offensive side of the ball, and that's across the board. Unless your name is Ryan Williams, you are subject to scrutiny here on this offense. And the running back position, it wasn't terrible. Certainly a talented guy. Justice Haynes, you see him going to Michigan, another premier program. But this is Alabama. I don't think there were enough explosive plays out of the running back position in these big games. And a guy like Jaden Washington has the opportunity to provide that, because if you're Alabama, nothing is sacred. You need to drastically improve what you're doing on the offensive side of the ball. And a guy like this, 10'8", 215 plus pounds, over 6 yards a carry at the college level. I like the pickup, and you've recruited extremely well at this position, but it's kind of put up or shut up time. We got to find out who is the best back, or who are the best backs to carry this offense to a higher level than what we saw in 2024.
So switching gears here to someone that a lot of the people who are watching live here are very familiar with, Zion Nelson, former Miami offensive tackle. He's transferring to SMU, and this is a name that's been around college football for a while now. You and I are familiar with his career back to when he committed to Miami as a really unheralded recruit out of the South Carolina, and was committed to actually App State, I believe, at the time. That's why I said North Carolina, but was a skinny guy, 6'5", 235 pounds or so when he committed to Miami. Ended up starting his first game at Miami against the Florida Gators, against some really good pass rushers on the other side there, and got beat up pretty badly, but quickly turned himself into a draft prospect. A couple years ago, he was showing up in first-round mock drafts. Mel Kiper had him as his top tackle in the draft. And look, as an agent at the time, I never personally heard he was a first-round pick. There was a lot more, fourth, fifth round type talk with him. But he was a real NFL draft prospect nonetheless. And from one day to the next, man, had this knee injury. Kept hearing he was going to, he was working himself back. Never really happened at Miami. Ends up redshirting a couple years ago. Sits out the whole season, still working himself back, and then medically retires before the season, right? So when his name popped in the portal a few weeks back, Miami fans were like, what? Where did this come from? So this was a very surprising development, but lands at SMU with Rhett Lashley, someone he has a lot of familiarity with.
And it's going to be 100% a medical question, right? I personally saw Zion Nelson practice in camp. I want to say it was spring. He practiced in pads, probably just to see where he was
fall
at.
Camp. I want to say it was August. I want to say it was August. Yeah.
But I was there. I saw it with my eyes. He was kind of like seeing Bigfoot, to see this guy after so many years actually practicing, and he looked okay. But then afterwards, you hear he's medically retiring. So whatever the reaction was and whatever the evaluation wasn't good enough. But if this guy can play, and it's funny because it wasn't a catastrophic knee injury, right? It wasn't like he just blew out his knee and you knew it was a nightmare. It was something that was just sort of deteriorating, and chronic, right? If he can play, first of all, 32 starts at left tackle with great athleticism and enough size, no brainer as a physical talent, NFL type physical talent. On top of that, his best seasons were under Rhett Lashley and current Southern Methodist offensive line coach Garen Justice, who was the offensive line coach for Miami when Zion was really at his peak. So if he is healthy, no brainer, easy starter at left tackle, and is going to make a big impact in the ACC and really help this team perform. If he's not healthy, he's not there. But I think from an SMU standpoint, it just makes a ton of sense as a fit that if this guy's going to play college football, he should be playing for Miami. They did have Ja'Kai Clark at center, another former Miami player who was the center on the offensive lines with Zion Nelson, and he did his job. But Zion's upside as a left tackle is significant, and more really than anybody on this SMU offensive line. This is an NFL type left tackle if he can be healthy.
Yeah, and it's the medical issue. Can he get back to the speed of the game, because he hasn't played in a game in 3 seasons now, that it's going to be by the time the season kicks off. And Dudu saying, I thought he medically retired, which, yeah, man, he had. And, I wonder if he was looking to get an insurance settlement or something from the situation. But, I'm glad to hear that he's going to give it a go again, honestly, right? Like, it's unfortunate that it didn't work out for him here in Miami, but the guy with a lot of talent, and you hope that he can find it again. You hope that he's healthy and can, live out that dream of playing in the NFL one day.
Yeah, and his best chance is going to be here with people who know him, people who have seen him at his best, and who know what he can do. So I think this is a perfect fit, is really going to come down to health. But if he's healthy, SMU has landed another Miami Hurricane transfer that can impact their program, help them get back to Charlotte. We talked about Brashard Smith at running back, one of their best players, Ja'Kai Clark at center. Their pass rush, which was one of the better pass rushes in the ACC. You had Elijah Roberts, Jafari Harvey, Jared Harrison Hunt. Again, these are all Miami transfers who have made a significant impact for SMU. They picked up Chris Johnson in the offseason, probably one of the fastest players in America, running back from Miami. So the Miami pipeline to SMU continues. And Zion, if he's healthy, would be an impact addition in the ACC, would immediately become one of the better offensive tackles in the conference.
Appreciate the almost 60 on live with us here on Group Chat Football Live. We go daily here, and we talk portal across the country. We talk recruiting, which excited to talk more recruiting here in the springtime, as the portal really slows down and we get into fall camp. A lot of high school camps. The Rivals, the Under Armour camp, all that good stuff that happens down here in South Florida and across the country. You get a good look at the next class. We'll be covering all that here on Group Chat Football Live. We'll stick with
real quick.
Yeah.
Like and subscribe to the show. And I want to answer this question from Jedi Joshua. Appreciate your question. Any news on Jaden Ott? Is he declaring or returning to Cal? He's returning to Cal. So, they got the new quarterback now. Saga Politelli he was originally committed to Cal, went to Oregon, now back. Borderline 5-star quarterback out of Hawaii, lefty, power arm, one of the best arms in the country. He decided he saw Mendoza leave Cal. He said, that's a golden opportunity for me to go in there and start as a true freshman. So he's there. Jaden Ott's there. They got to add some receivers to that room. They got to add some offensive linemen, but they got the quarterback in place who is probably the best quarterback prospect Cal has signed in some time out of high school.
So we'll stick with the offensive line here as former Alabama starting right tackle Elijah Pritchett was a former 5-star in the 2023 class out of Columbus, Georgia. Looks like he's trending towards the Nebraska Cornhuskers, a program that's been very active in the portal. A lot of what they've done has been very directly for the quarterback position, as most schools at this time of year are doing on the offensive side of the ball. But protecting Dylan Raiola, getting him weapons has been priority A and priority 2A for Nebraska. And Pritchett, a guy who had an up and down season for Alabama, from, what I've seen and the sentiment amongst Alabama fans is that he struggled in pass protection. I think the PFF numbers will back that up for the most part. But offensive line, we talk about O-line and D-line here, and we always say you bet on the talent, you bet on the upside. These guys are developmental, even if they're a 5-star. These are positions of development, and Nebraska taking a chance here on a guy who just started an entire season in the SEC.
Yeah, and one thing that Matt Rule loves, it is physical traits. He is a guy that is obsessed when it comes to evaluating high school players, or in this case, college players, with physical traits, whether that's track times for wide receivers, shot puts, whatever for linemen. So you talk about Elijah Pritchett. This is a former 5-star player from Columbus, Georgia, 6'6", 327 pounds. So the dimensions are just unique, and he can move. Now, look, on the field in the SEC, did not have a great year. 31 pressures, worst on the team, 6 sacks. But he started 12 out of 13 games, mostly on the right side, also filled in for Caden Proctor when he was hurt. So you have experience, you have traits. This is a classic bounce back candidate. You're losing Bryce Benhart. You need another tackle. This is someone who can slide right in, help protect Raiola. And look, it's not going to be perfect. That's why you're getting a 5-star, 6'6", 327-pound tackle in the portal. You know, if it was perfect, those guys would be untouchable. They'd either be at the school they're at or in the pros. But this is someone you can develop and work with, and you trust your offensive line coaching to get the most out of him, change the scenery. There were some off-field distractions, too, with Pritchett. I mean, kind of self-imposed off-the-field distractions. Arrested in December 2023 for knowingly passing on a sexually transmitted disease. That one got a lot of press, as you can imagine. Also arrested for speeding that April. He flirted with the portal around December of this time period, ultimately coming back. So a lot of baggage there at Alabama. Gets a fresh start at Nebraska. Should get that starting job at right tackle. And it's going to be interesting to see if all these additions that Nebraska has made, right, between, you know, the Dane Keys of the world and others at the receiver position, right? You talk about Harley Gilmore, adding speed and size and athleticism at receiver. Now you're adding offensive line support for Dylan Raiola. I think it's clear that the idea is let's get this guy, our franchise, in the best position to break out and had that huge sophomore year, because he showed flashes as a freshman, but the expectations now rise as a sophomore. Can the supporting cast rise with him?
And Canes Cats Heat 305 is asking what his market was in the portal. It's interesting. He entered the portal on January 4th, and he's been, he's getting these predictions now 2-3 days later. So it seems like it was a pretty quick recruitment there. And look, a guy like this, as you mentioned here, anyone with SEC experience and only a sophomore with those physical traits is going to be, a take in this situation. This is a guy that I don't know what the number was, but I'm sure that he's getting paid well for his services.
Right. No, this is a top 10 portal class right now for Nebraska. Some names I didn't mention, Isaiah Hunter from California, right? A big play, very talented receiver that's going to help Raiola along with Harley Gilmore and, of course, Dane Key. And then biggest one of all, as far as we're talking about loving traits, Williams Nwaneri from Missouri, defensive end, former 5-star, goes to Nebraska, hadn't produced a ton as a true freshman last year for Missouri. So he goes to Nebraska, not very far, with a chance to really maximize his potential. So you see the pattern. Traits, and then also trying to build around Raiola. I think you accomplish both of those with the addition of Pritchett. Now it's about him taking that next step with his 2 years of eligibility and becoming what people expected out of high school.
Canes Cats Heat 305 asking what his rating was in the portal. He says he has to be a top 5 to 10 guy. I don't know what he is right now. We can pull that up here.
Yeah, I'll tell you right now. But again, this is a top 10 portal class, by the way, before Pritchett officially gets added. So Pritchett in the portal ranking is a 4-star 92 overall ranking according to 247. That's a strong ranking there in the portal. So he's going to elevate Nebraska's ranking, which is already top 10, a little bit more. 92 is a good ranking. And again, it's because of the experience at tackle, which is invaluable. And then the size. I think those are the traits that enable him to be that 4-star 92 transfer, despite not being, a sensational on-field performer to this point. Is you want guys with experience. You don't want guys that, look at like a Miles McVay, for example, who went to North Carolina from Alabama. Also very talented, also highly touted, also big with the right dimensions, but he didn't play very much, right, for North Carolina. So Bill Belichick gets him based on the traits. This is someone who also has the traits, but he's played 12 of 13 starts this year. So I think that's what elevates him to that 92 transfer ranking, and someone that Nebraska probably feels pretty good about adding to that offensive line room.
Taking a look at someone else who's leaving the SEC, and that's Jake Pope, former Alabama and Georgia safety, as he's transferring to UNLV, and Dan Mullen over there in Las Vegas as UNLV continues to retool their roster. They've lost a lot defensively. And Jake Pope, this is a nice piece for them. This is not a guy who's played a ton in his first few seasons of college football. Again, started his career at Alabama there, but was a relatively big recruit out of Georgia a few years back. He played in 5 games this year, and a lot of you may remember him for the incident that happened after the Ole Miss loss, where he was taking pictures with a former high school teammate as the Ole Miss fans stormed the field, and he was seen laughing and kind of joking around after the team lost. And Kirby, of course, he said, "What an idiot, just stupid. I didn't see it until today." He's embarrassed about it. He's upset about it. So that he kind of put him out to dry there. Kirby then did apologize after he said, look, he appreciated how he handled it. He's a great kid. He works hard. He appreciated how he handled it with the team. But that was Kirby in that press conference. That was a classic moment from the college football season this year. But outside of that moment, this is a guy who hasn't necessarily shown it yet here on the college level, but could kind of revive his career over there as a talented guy. And again, by all accounts, has been a good teammate and is a hard worker and all of that.
Yes, this guy's entering his 4th year, Pope. So he is ready to play. That's why he's going to UNLV. You lose Jalen Catalon. He goes to the SEC. Now you get someone from the SEC coming in. So it's almost it's like a program, right? Hopefully you keep Pope all the way until hopefully the NFL with this new UNLV, this new look UNLV program. Then me and Pete, we are both very, very high on the potential here with Dan Mullen, with everything that they got going on. But in terms of Pope, watching him in high school, so he signs with Alabama in high school and transfers to Georgia, has not played a ton, but just remembering him as a high school prospect. Buford, Georgia, enormous program in the state of Georgia, really one of the biggest programs in the Southeast. 5-star, 4-star players every year, extremely well coached. This is a guy that was playing receiver, returning kicks, playing defense. He was a star center fielder on the baseball team, consummate athlete, great GPA as well, just kind of exactly everything you want in a high school student athlete. But because of the athleticism and the size, he had traits that allowed him to go to not 1, but 2 of the biggest SEC schools, probably the 2 biggest SEC schools of this era. So there's a lot of talent there. He just needs reps. And these schools are recruiting 5-star defensive backs every single year. Hard to break in. There's a long list of guys that didn't, get on the field there in the secondary. They were able to build their careers elsewhere once they transferred out. You look at a guy like Amos at Ole Miss, an Alabama transfer, didn't really get where he wanted to go at the cornerback position, ends up going to Ole Miss. Now he's an NFL player, NFL prospect. So there are a lot of talented kids kind of buried on these teams. And I think what I like about Pope, if you're UNLV, 4-year guy, right? So he's coming in with experience, even if he hasn't played a ton. The versatility, great special teams player, athletic, enough to play receiver, but can also, he's a defensive back. This could be one of your culture builders to say, hey, this guy's going to play a ton. He's going to replace Catalon. He's going to be a centerpiece of our defense and really lead guys and be the face of this defense. Now, he's got to prove it. He hasn't done it on the field, but I think going down to this level with all the tools he has, all the experience he has, being around the biggest programs, both at the high school and college level, I really like the fit because UNLV needs a safety and Jake Pope needs an opportunity to play big snaps. There's a program, we keep saying it, is on the rise. Mullen's going to get these guys playing well. He just needs to stack the talent, particularly in the defensive end, which is not his expertise. I love the addition of Pope.
Yeah, man. I've been out there to the campus of the facility. I was out there for the East-West Shrine practices not this last year, but the couple years before that. And they have a lot to sell, man. Not far from the Strip. Good program that has a lot of potential.
Yeah, appreciate you, Coconut Grove, Kane. Again, appreciate everybody's support. What are we? Yeah, we got the live show's cooking today.
Yeah, man, we're doing well, man. Appreciate everyone who's on here. Like and subscribe.
And appreciate all the UNLV fans because we do a lot of UNLV content because we just are fascinated by this program and where they could go. We've seen Dan Mullen and what he can do in the SEC. He just needs to get talent there, and I think he's going to be able to recruit elite talent to UNLV for that conference more than SEC, where it's so highly competitive that if you're not an elite recruiter, which Mullen wasn't, he didn't love that part of the game, you're at a huge disadvantage. UNLV, there's more that he can sell relative to other programs that allows him to get a guy like Pope, who I think is going to have a very, very, very big impact at this school.
Some pretty significant news that dropped last night there on the West Coast is Arizona State. their top wide receiver target for Sam Levitt, Jordan Tyson, announced that he's returning to the Sun Devils in 2025. It's crazy, man. Some of these announcements are like they're re-signing their deal. They got their 1 year extension, and he's staying there because this was a guy that there was some buzz, there was some rumors as he started his career at Colorado, has over 1,000 yards with Sam Levitt, great duo this season for Arizona State, and then gets hurt in their last regular season game of the year. They were without him for that playoff game against Texas. They were without him, in the conference championship game as well. So they definitely missed him there near the end of the season. But you get him back now, and you obviously are losing Cam Scatterbo, which is a big loss. But you got to feel pretty good about bringing back your top receiver and then your quarterback.
Yeah, you lose Scatterbo, who's really the face of the program. But I think what you're seeing here is a shift from Cam Scatterbo as the face of the program to Sam Levitt as the face of the program. And Jordan Tyson, another guy who can be the face of this resurgent Sun Devils program, who really were America's sweethearts after. I mean, they really were a fun team to watch all year. But then what they did against Texas, going toe-to-toe, showing incredible toughness, resilience for their head coach, Kenny Dillingham, I think they have now upped their profile, and you're seeing just a shift. So what I mean by that, Arizona State this past year, 18th in rushing play percentage. That means they run the ball more often than pretty much anybody. They're 18th as far as running the ball the most. Okay, so the higher ranking you are, the more you run. Of course, Cam Scatterbo, that's what you're going to do. You're going to run the football. But you did have Sam Levitt emerging throughout the season. Maybe more so as a runner than a passer, but one of the big reasons you saw that in the Pac-12, see, this is how old I'm getting, in the Big 12 championship and in the playoff.
I forgot Bedlam was dead yesterday.
I know we're still learning this rearrangement, but the reason he ran so much later in the year in these critical games was because he did not have Jordan Tyson. And when you look at Jordan Tyson, okay, 3-star out of Allen, Texas, huge program in Allen, Texas. They made a lot of national headlines with their big stadium. So that's big time football, but he wasn't as big. He was a long jumper, so he had explosiveness, but he wasn't as big. He has grown and then developed first at Colorado, where he kind of burst on the scene after a redshirt year, and then now here at Arizona State. And you look at the game log of this guy's last, basically after Cincinnati, I mean, 100 plus yards, 100 plus yards, 100 plus yards. This guy is, from Cincinnati game on, one of the best, most productive receivers in America, period. So if he entered the portal, he would have been a huge target, ends up staying with his quarterback. I think it's a great move for all sides. And if you're Arizona State, now that you got him back, you got to feature him. You got to build your offense. Again, shifting from the Scatterbo era to the Levitt Tyson era and build around this guy, because he is really, really talented. The Big 12 offensive newcomer of the year.
And then you look at Arizona State as a whole, and I'm going to pull up this tweet right here from Chris Karpman that he tweeted out yesterday. ASU players have until 11:59 p.m. today, so that was last night, to officially request to enter the transfer portal. ASU has 2 days to process requests. No 2024 starters have entered the portal. Only 3 projected 2025 2-deep players have entered thus far. Believe one of their leading receivers actually entered late last night. The news came out this morning. He was the guy who kind of replaced Jordan Tyson in his absence. So maybe when Tyson announced his return, he decided to enter. But to me, this is a huge sign for the development of this program and Kenny Dillingham. I mean, a school that has perennially, as the portal has been a thing the last few years, been ravaged through the portal. So now to see them keep guys here after a huge season, it's a great sign for them, and they're not just getting poached.
No, so just on the Tyson point, because I mentioned the game log, I'll read it to you so you know what I'm talking about. Cincinnati, which was on October 19th, 108 yards, then 81 yards, 99 yards. And look at these last 3 games. Kansas State, BYU, both ranked opponents, and then Arizona on the road. 176 yards against Kansas State, 12 catches, 2 touchdowns, 125 yards, 9 catches against BYU, 8 catches for 143 yards and a touchdown against Arizona. I mean, this guy, if he would have gone in the portal, would have been absolutely right there at the top in terms of the coveted players in the portal. So sometimes we always focus on the guys that leave and the guys that hit the open market. But sometimes it's these kind of moves that are truly impactful on the college football playoff scene, on the next year's season. There you see the game log. Just an incredible move for Arizona State. And if you're Sam Leavitt, who has made clearly, Sam Leavitt could have gotten the same amount of attention too if he jumped in the portal with some of these quarterback needy teams. You're the happiest guy in the state of Arizona right now. And I don't think he's going to have the numbers necessarily be a Heisman candidate next year like Scadaboo was, but you could see his passing numbers, which were good, but, not, elite from just a pure stat standpoint. You can see those numbers take a huge jump as this offense becomes more pass-centric with these two very talented players.
Spoke earlier about how Georgia is losing a big talent in Damon Wilson, but we spoke yesterday about how they're adding the Branch brothers, and another big-time talent on the offensive side of the football could be headed their way as well, as they're starting to get some predictions. Pete Nakos has predicted that Noah Thomas, transfer wide receiver from Texas A&M, could be headed to Georgia. Thomas had 8 touchdowns last season, tied for second in the SEC. And this is a big-bodied 6'6" wide receiver, red zone threat, a downfield threat. And Georgia's issues have been really under the microscope here the last few weeks in terms of a lack of skilled position talent on the offensive side of the football.
Yeah, and we saw how impactful Kobe Young was for Georgia when he was playing. Obviously, had the domestic dispute, the whole incident, which we'll see how that resolves. It's kind of gone back and forth, but you can't count on Kobe Young. So a guy like Noah Thomas is really a better version of what Kobe Young gave you as far as a ball winner, somebody who was size. I think Noah Thomas is better at getting down the field than Kobe Young, and he was really the guy for Texas A&M. 39 catches, 574 yards, 8 touchdowns last year. 14.7 yards per catch was a healthy number, and it was really impressive in the bowl game against USC. So he is in top form right now. It's not like this guy is on the downward trend. Was there the chemistry with Marcel Reed? I'm not sure. Now, Georgia's got their own quarterback questions. Is Gunnar Stockton going to run it back? Let's assume he does, and he's the guy after what he did in the playoff and in the SEC championship. You say, okay, what does a young quarterback like this need? How about a safety blanket who's 6'6", who is 200 pounds, who is extremely productive, who's got 15 touchdowns in his career, and athletically, basketball player, track background. He's got all that from Clear Springs High in League City, Texas. I think the fit at Georgia makes a lot of sense. You brought in Zechariah Branch, who's going to be your big play receiver from USC, just recently committed. So those are your screens, right? Those are your quick passes. Maybe you're throwing it downfield and using his speed to get downfield, but you need a safety blanket. And Branch, with his size, only about 180 pounds, under 6 foot, that's not what he is. So Noah Thomas gives you that. And what Noah Thomas does is really not on Georgia's roster right now. I mean, Kobe Young, again, we'll see how that situation develops. But even if Kobe Young's available, Noah Thomas is a higher level talent that will really help Stockton's game.
We'll stick with the Bulldogs here as we talk about a guy who Georgia did land today officially, and that's Jaden Harris, who was a former defensive back at the University of Miami, and he's reuniting with UGA safeties coach Travaris T-Rob Robinson, who recruited him to Miami. Now, Miami fans, if you do a quick search on Twitter, Miami fans did not approve very much of the season that Jaden Harris had. He did struggle for the Hurricanes this year, but a guy that both you and I before the season were high on for Miami. He's a smart kid, physically gifted. Safety, I don't know if maybe corner might be the better position for him moving forward. Is long, can run, but at safety this year was out of position a ton, seemed to be lost a lot pre-snap. New place for him here. I think the switching of sceneries could be a really positive thing for his career.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting. So T-Rob recruited him out of a small school in Atlanta, Georgia, as a cornerback, right? So is that where he's going to return? Has his body just gotten too far down the road? He's too muscled up to play at the corner position. We'll see. He's played nickel at Miami as well. So very interesting to see what role Georgia has in mind for Harris. Could it be that star position, right? You don't know. That's part of what makes this take intriguing is obviously Travaris Robinson sees something in Harris that's more than what he gave on the field this season. Maybe from his high school recruiting, maybe just from the vision he has for the player and how he could be used. That's different from what he did at Miami when he was very much a pure safety. You look at the PFF grade, 57.5 rating on defense, and it honestly looked worse than that when you saw it in person. It just size, speed, effort, someone that I thought was going to have a very big year for Miami. The game against Florida, the first game, he was ACC Defensive Back of the Week, was outstanding. And then it just kind of dropped off after that. He was in his head a little bit as far as open field tackling and just some indecisiveness, recognizing patterns when it comes to running, to routes in front of his face. I think going to a guy like T-Rob, Kirby Smart, you can't be in a better situation as a defensive back to rehab. He can also help you on special teams with his ability to run down the field. He's a willing tackler. He's physical. Again, the tackling problem was not the physicality. It was more of just gearing down and being in a position to tackle as opposed to, angles, things like that. It wasn't like willingness. It's not a soft player. So I think speed, willingness, the ability to be physical, great kid also. So there's none of that issue. You're Georgia. You lose out on a Zachariah Poyser from Jacksonville State, who you wanted at safety, ended up going to the University of Miami. Ethan O'Connor, another battle that didn't go your way, to the Canes. If I'm Georgia, I'm wondering how are we not getting these guys? Georgia is Georgia. They've been putting NFL defensive backs out every single year. T-Rob's been doing it his whole career. So, I'm probably a little puzzled that I'm not winning some of these battles in the defensive backfield. Julian Humphrey, he was benched and then goes on to Texas A&M. A little different situation. But, I'd expect to see Georgia crank up the recruiting here in the secondary. They have young guys that need to play. Ellis Robinson, of course, foremost among them. KJ Bolden, one of the best in the country. But I don't know. I'd expect a little more from Georgia in the portal here. And maybe that's to come. Maybe that's in spring. Maybe they just want to get their young, talented players. They've been the best recruiting program in the country now for a while. Maybe they just want some of their young guys to get a bigger role. But this one to me is more of just, hey, can we use him differently than he was used in Miami and get more out of him?
We have a question here from the Big Lubbock. Is Texas Tech adding any more portal transfers? Look, they're at 20 guys right now. So that's, 20 portal additions is a big number. Could they add maybe one or two more? I'm not gonna count it out of the realm of possibility, but I think when you've taken that many, maybe hold some spots for this next wave of transfers in the spring. D, I don't know if you agree with me.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, is that it's not just, you're not trying to win the spring game, right? You're trying to win in the season. So you don't know who's going to get hurt. You don't know who might underperform. Maybe you counted on a young player to fill a role and you say, yeah, it's not going to work. Or maybe a young player overperforms and you say, we don't need help here. We're good. We got to get this guy on the field. And then, of course, if you suffer a major injury, that becomes a need. So I think Texas Tech has laid an incredible foundation. We're going to talk about the preseason top 10, some of these way too early preseason top 10s that have been floating around. I can see Texas Tech, not as a preseason top 10 team, but maybe doing what Arizona State did this year and getting into the top 10 by the end of the year. But right now, they've done so much work at so many spots. You got to see what you have and then leave some lead in the pencil for after spring.
Texas Tech did hire officially Darcel McBath as their cornerbacks coach yesterday, former, NFL vet. So that's a bit of Texas Tech news there.
There you go. Yeah, the coaching staff's been overhauled in terms of offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator. Certainly, the talent's been overhauled. And you won 8 games. You're not a team that's totally barren. You got a quarterback coming back. You got a head coach coming back. Really excited to see the direction of Texas Tech.
So as we keep, and again, thank you to the Texas Tech fans that are watching and have subscribed and watched another program that obviously we're excited about, and we're going to keep pumping out content for the Red Raider fans out there. So another pickup that happened in the last 24 hours here is Malik Benson, wide receiver, formerly of Alabama and Florida State this past season, is headed to Oregon. And this is an interesting one, D, because he is a guy who hasn't had a bunch of production at this level yet, but was a big recruit coming out of high school. Then at, Hutchinson JUCO, speedster. Again, only 473 receiving yards the past 2 seasons. Not a great situation at Florida State offensively this year, but he was kind of expected to be kind of their go-to guy, I would say, talking to a lot of Florida State people before the season. That did not materialize. And then Alabama was stuck, on the lower part of the depth chart. But Oregon obviously seeing something here as a guy who could potentially stretch the field or be some sort of decoy for them.
Yeah, look, Oregon is in terms of talent acquisition, they're right up there with Georgia on top of the country. So it's not like they're just being desperate here to get a player who hasn't produced. I think you see, first of all, there's a need at receiver, right? Talk about Trayshawn Holden, senior, Tez Johnson, who's your most dynamic receiver. He is a senior. And then Evan Storm likely to go pro. Gary Bryant, another veteran player, hasn't really fully broken through there. So you got slots. You got a new quarterback, most likely in Dante Moore, the talented transfer they took from UCLA, the former 5-star. So you got to give him weapons. And I think with Malik Benson, you're saying, okay, if we're expecting to be number one like FSU did, we're going to probably be disappointed. But if he's a role player with his role being stretch the field, go downfield, Dante Moore's got a big arm. Let him move those safeties back, or if they want to play up and try to stop the run, looks like you're going to add, Mekhi Hughes from Tulane, so your running game should be on point. If you want to stop the run, he's going to make you pay downfield, and you can get your quarterback loosened up that way with those deep throws, which Dante Moore is historically good at, going back to high school with his big physical arm. I think it makes sense from a role player standpoint. Now, if you're expecting Malik Benson to be Evan Stewart or Tez Johnson as a player, I think you will be disappointed there. But to me, Oregon is really going to be about, DeCorian Moore and what he brings to the table as a true freshman. That's going to be just, to me, one of the best players possibly in the Big Ten as a true freshman. I really see him being that guy from day one. You don't want to hype someone who hasn't played yet, but seeing DeCorian Moore and how he conducts himself, his size, I compared him to a smaller Jamar Chase just because of his power and explosiveness. That combination, also maybe the number one has something to do with it. But I think he'll be a day one player, and I think Benson is going to be more of a complementary player as opposed to, like a Stewart replacement or something like that. I don't see that, and I think Oregon's still not done adding wide receivers.
Well, and that's what I was going to say. From Benson's point of view, it's a bit interesting because I would have thought maybe when he entered the portal that he would go to a place that he knew he'd be the guy and he'd get some targets and be able to kind of showcase what he could do. And I'm not saying it can't happen in Oregon, but that's less likely there.
Yeah, no, this is a great opportunity, man. I mean, if you're Malik Benson, you're at Alabama, you're a junior college and you're at Alabama, then you're at Florida State as the number one receiver on paper, and now you're at Oregon. I mean, you've been, wine and dine pretty good here. And the curious thing for me, just from an Oregon standpoint, is that this is the first wide receiver that Oregon brought in through the portal. So we'll see who they add, because I don't see, I think you got to leave space for DeCorian Moore, because I do think he can be like a Ryan Williams and Jeremiah Smith and start day one, and that's one of your starters. But I still think you need more given what you're losing. So that's a team to watch maybe in the spring, post-spring portal to see who they bring in a wide receiver.
Almost 80 on here, guys. Appreciate all the support. Remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel. Canes Cats Heat 305 asking if Jaden Harris is a walk-on at Georgia. No, I don't think so at all. I think he's 100% a scholarship player.
Yep. I heard the same, and that's the portal is different, right? These are not high school recruits. You're taking a guy for a specific role, and you know what he can do by the time he gets there. Georgia saw the same film you did, and they think they can put him in a position to be successful, probably different than what he was doing at the University of Miami.
And look, I think for Harris's sake too, I think it was probably best for him just to get a new place. It wasn't a great season, and I think that he just needs a fresh start. So, but last topic here for the day, as this is a very interesting situation. USC fans not very happy about how this one's playing out. The transfer offensive lineman, Emmanuel Ogbah, who started his career at Wyoming, was one of the best linemen in the conference the past 2 seasons. 6'5", 320-pound guard, has started 25 games over the past 2 years for the Trojans, second team all conference. And there was kind of an understanding by a lot of people that this would be his last year in college and he'd be headed to the NFL level. He announced a few days last week that he was coming back to school. And then a few days later says, well, I'm coming back to school, but I'm entering the portal. And now we've got a heavyweight battle brewing, as the two favorites to watch at this point are Colorado and Coach Prime, and Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin.
Yeah, first of all, USC, this is a body blow. You could tell when this guy entered the portal, the USC fans were taken aback, reporters were taken aback. I'm sure the coaches were as well, especially given that he had announced that he was coming back. I mean, your USC, your offensive line was a tremendous weakness this past year, forced you to throw a lot of short passes. Your yards per attempt very much reduced because you had to account for the issues on the offensive line. Mason Murphy, a tackle, goes to Auburn as a 4-star transfer. Jonah Monheim onto the NFL. So really bad news for USC, but really good news for one of these two programs. 6'5", 320, over 25 starts, was a really big portal entry when he first came in from Wyoming. A guy that caught a lot of attention at that point, and he's only lived up to the hype at the Big Ten level. NFL buzz for Pregnon, somebody that a lot of people thought would get drafted if he would decided to go pro this year. So Ole Miss is a team that has been living in the portal. They got portal interior linemen last year, repeating that potentially with a Pregnon. If you're Deion Sanders, no brainer to go after this guy. You've been trying to build that offensive line for years. He'd immediately be your best offensive lineman, along with 5-star emerging superstar Jordan Seaton there at left tackle. You want to help out Caden Salter, your transfer portal quarterback. You also got a young guy coming in who may play in Juju Lewis, smaller player, needs help in front of him. So no brainer there from Deion's standpoint as far as the interest. If you have money, this is the kind of place you want to spend your money. If you're Deion Sanders, and there's a natural link. Pregnon, a Denver, Colorado native, of course. So the local ties to Colorado are strong, but Ole Miss, they're in the SEC. They pay a lot. They got Dunlap Tires money behind them. They've been extremely successful in the portal. They've got a track record of getting these portal guys and developing them to the next level. And to me, there's a heavyweight battle between two of the bigger NIL programs, both of which have a screaming need in the interior line.
Got a question here from Ladarius Benson asking, any college football coaches going to the NFL? A lot of those NFL coaching spots opening up here in the last couple days. So I think that rumor mill will get started here. We've heard Dan Lanning's name been thrown around there. I think Oregon's an amazing job, and I think it would take a lot for him to leave there, especially so early here in his career at Oregon. But that's one that's been thrown around a decent amount.
Yeah, and look, how about the two guys that we're talking about right now with Deion Sanders and Lane Kiffin? I think both these guys are going to get some pro attention. Deion's a little more, unusual, but that's been rumored forever. Lane, I think, Lane has been knocking on the door of the playoff. Does he want to rebuild this team, which is pretty much all gone, and then start from scratch? They're going to, they're done really well in the portal. They always will. So they should be good next year. But do you want to go through that all again, as opposed to taking your tremendous play calling ability back to the NFL? Does he still have, a reputation left? I know he burned some bridges the way the last time went down. But going back to Pregnon, because I don't want to miss this point. If you're Ole Miss, Nate Kalepo, who they got from Washington last year, their left guard, he's gone. Caleb Warren, his backup, gone. Jeremy James, gone. Eli Acker, gone. Those are their top 4 offensive guards, all gone. You absolutely need to rebuild this position in the portal if you're Ole Miss, going against those big, nasty SEC defensive linemen. I mean, you have Austin Simmons coming in as your quarterback, someone that we've watched since he was in high school down here in South Florida. Great baseball player, really showing impressive flashes for Ole Miss. Some guy that I think he could be a star in the SEC in this offense, but he needs help. You added Delano Townsend, from UAB, but you need more inside. PJ Wilkins from Charlotte. These are different level additions than a guy like Pregnon, who is immediately a top 5 player in the portal and an NFL prospect the second that he jumps in.
SP1 Worrell says Lanning Chicago makes sense.
Yeah, look, Lanning, he's a defensive mind. He's a great recruiter, which doesn't necessarily translate, but he's a young guy. He's a respected guy. Oregon has played, aside from the no-show against Ohio State, has been a pretty consistent program under Dan Lanning. Lost some close games, but I think they've been pretty consistent week in, week out. to me, I'd rather focus on the offensive guys. You see Cliff Kingsbury kind of rehabilitating his career there in the pros with what he's done with Jalen Daniels. Lane Kiffin, he doesn't get talked about a lot with the pros, but I could see one of those Schefter bombs or Rappaport bombs, and now Lane Kiffin is in the mix for jobs because he's still one of the best play callers in America, still young, and it's a league all about young quarterbacks. And seeing what Lane Kiffin's done with Jackson Dart and others, Matt Corral, he's a guy that I think has rehabilitated his reputation a little bit. Might be in a position to return back to the pro game.
You said Jalen Daniels, man. Jaden Daniels.
You know what I was thinking about? The Kansas quarterback who is an electrifying player for the Jayhawks. So I'm getting old.
Well, man, great feedback today from everyone. Great job in the comments, man. We love to, answer some of these questions and get you guys involved in the show here. So don't be afraid to do that moving forward. Matthew Owen, man, appreciate you as always. And guys, remember to hit that like button on this video, subscribe to the channel, helping us grow big time. And we're going to keep it coming here in 2025. So stay locked on Group Chat Football Live every day. And we'll keep you guys updated across the country. We'll be going live on Canes Insight here in just a bit. So check us out over there.
See you tomorrow. Appreciate you.